It's funny how a good story usually starts with a bad decision. In the case of Richard Dicky James, his story began with a ship, a delivery, and a price on his head that was honestly insulting by the zero count. They should have offered 1 billion credits for the amount of trouble he caused the Galactic Council. Dicky wasn't a hero. He wouldn't have used the word altruistic if you held a laser pistol to his head. He was a smuggler, a renegade hauler, a criminal wanted across 3 systems. But he had rules. No planet killers, no death dust. He'd get you the medicine the council swore was unstable for public consumption, because a healthy populace is harder to manage than a sick one. And if you were a group of planetary rebels trying to pry the chains off a slaver colony, Dicky was your man. He was a criminal with a heart, and that made him the most dangerous kind of human in the galaxy. His ship, the Lucky Strike, was an eyesore. It was a blocky, heavily modified transport, built originally for short-haul ore delivery, but now sporting so many patched-up hull plates and non-regulation boosters, it looked less like a vessel and more like a space-going jigsaw puzzle. The cockpit sat jauntily off-center, giving Dicky a commanding, if slightly lopsided, view of the starlight rushing past. She was temperamental. She smelled faintly of burnt wires and cheap coffee. But when Dicky nursed her engines, the Lucky Strike could run rings around anything the Council's patrol fleet threw at her. The job that night was simple on paper. Deliver 150 kilograms of high-grade, Council-restricted phage buster nanoserum to the quarantine zone around the colony world of Xylos 7. Simple, except the entire sector was locked down tighter than a vault, and the Council had just assigned Commander Kalar, a Krillian who believed laws were carved in stone, not written in digital ink, to the area. Kalar was the kind of Krillian who'd burn a village to save a statute. Dicky sat in his pilot chair, chewing on the end of a long-dead cigar, watching the star map flicker. "Bobby, are you sure about the jumps?" He drawled into the com, his voice a gravelly rumble meant for late nights and low volumes. Bobby, a squat, jittery mechanic who was Dicky's only permanent crew, replied from the engineering well. "Dicky, I've triple-checked the manifold calculations. The only way through that blockade is to skim the corona of the Xylocrux 9 star. It's a suicide route, but it's the only route their sensors won't penetrate." "Suicide is just bad planning, Bobby," Dicky corrected, expertly maneuvering the Lucky Strike around a field of space debris. "This is just aggressive rerouting." He felt the familiar thrum of the patrol fleet sensors starting to ping in the distance. They were closing fast, likely a fast frigate running ahead of a heavy cruiser. They knew he was coming. Someone had talked. It always came back to someone talking. Incoming contacts, 2 light frigates, closing at .9 light. Commander Kalar isn't playing around this time. He's running a flanking maneuver. Bobby's voice crackled with rising panic. Dicky sighed, leaning back and resting his boots on the console. Kalar, predictable. The Krillian thinks like a textbook. Good for him, bad for textbooks. The small screen above the main viewport flashed, showing 2 bright, aggressive pinpricks of light accelerating toward them. Dicky's fingers danced across the secondary controls, prepping the strike's asymmetric shield emitters. "All right, Bobby, fire up the surprise package," Dicky commanded. "The what? Dicky, we only have 1 engine." "We have 3, Bobby. 2 that work, and 1 we haven't checked since we picked it up on Mars Prime. It's got enough volatile juice to give us one hell of a burn." The frigates were close enough now that Dicky could practically hear their commanders shouting. They launched a tight, focused burst of plasma fire. The Lucky Strike's cobbled-together shields flared, absorbing the impact with a shudder that rattled Dicky's teeth. "They're trying to herd us toward the Council cruiser, the Intrepid. That thing'll turn us into space dust," Dicky muttered. He slammed the controls forward, pushing the Strike into a tight, impossible spin that defied the ship's bulk. The spin threw off the frigate's targeting computers, their follow-up shots whistling harmlessly past the hull. "Now, Bobby, engage the Corona skim sequence. Give me full power to the main vectoring thrusters. We're going to hug the sun," Dicky ordered. Bobby screamed back, "Dicky, the plasma radiation will cook us alive. The shielding won't hold." "It won't have to hold long, kid. Just long enough to ruin Kalar's day." Dicky pointed the nose of the Lucky Strike not into the black, but toward the violent, fiery yellow star known as Xylocrux 9. The star filled the viewport, its solar flares looking like terrifying golden whips cracking against the edges of their shields. The entire ship groaned in protest. The Council frigates, bound by sensible physics and expensive insurance policies, refused to follow. They slowed, their commanders probably shaking their heads at the sheer, idiotic audacity of a human pilot pushing his vessel into a stellar corona. Dicky, however, was already deep in the burn. The temperature inside the cockpit was unbearable, the smell of burnt coffee now mixed with the acrid scent of overloaded coolant. He ignored the warnings screaming from every panel. Humans, he'd always believed, excelled at ignoring warnings. For 12 agonizing minutes, the lucky strike rode the invisible waves of the star's magnetic field, the solar radiation overloading every sensor array the Council had in the system. They were blind to him, and he was temporarily insane. "Cut the power, now," Dicky roared, sweat stinging his eyes. The ship lurched, plunging from the searing brightness into the relative cool of the deep dark. They had crossed the entire sector in the blind spot. The frigates were nowhere to be seen. Dicky checked the long-range scanners. They were just outside the Xylos 7 quarantine zone. But there it was. The Intrepid, Commander Kalar's massive, intimidating cruiser, sitting dead center over the planet's atmosphere, daring Dicky to approach. Kalar anticipated the maneuver, Dicky cursed, finally pulling the cigar out of his mouth and tossing it aside. He knows if a hauler vanishes near a star, he's coming out the other side near his target. He's not a textbook, he's a damn library. "We can't get past him, Dicky. He's got the whole system locked down. We're within weapons range," Bobby yelled, clambering up the access ladder. "We're not going past him, Bobby," Dicky said, a wild, dangerous grin stretching across his face. "We're going through him." Dicky pulled up the targeting display. The vital cargo bay, full of the life-saving phage buster serum, was automatically jettison capable. Engage the gravity chute for the payload. Target the equatorial deployment zone. We need to drop it high enough that the atmospheric friction doesn't burn it up, and low enough that the locals can recover it quickly, Dicky explained, his voice suddenly calm and professional. "But what about the ship? And Kalar?" "Kalar is an honest strategist, Bobby, and an honest strategist believes a criminal will protect his score. He'll expect us to run after we drop the payload. He won't expect us to run before," Dicky said. He armed the one remaining piece of black market tech he'd never had a chance to use. A high-power, short-range kinetic scrambler, an experimental device designed to temporarily confuse the targeting data of a massive vessel by overloading its short-range navigational computers. The Intrepid fired, not plasma, but heavy-duty iron cannons. They weren't trying to disable him, they were trying to vaporize the criminal and his cargo instantly. Dicky didn't dodge. He accelerated, aiming the boxy, battered nose of the Lucky Strike right at the cruiser's bridge, a tiny gnat charging a monolith. "Payload release in 5 seconds, Dicky counted, slamming the scrambler's activation key. The ship lurched violently as the heavy cargo bay doors blew open. The canister containing the serum, protected by a bespoke atmospheric reentry shell, shot out and arced towards Xylos 7. At the exact same instant, the scrambler fired. It was a massive, non-lethal electronic shockwave. The Intrepid didn't explode or shut down, but for one crucial, blinding microsecond, the entire hull of the cruiser flared blue as the captain lost all telemetry and targeting data. The iron cannon blasts, already traveling, veered off course by mere meters, creating blinding flashes right next to the Lucky Strike's hull. Dicky's ship was slammed sideways by the near misses, alarms screaming in a desperate chorus. The Lucky Strike was on fire, literally tiny electrical fires sparking in the rear engineering decks. "The scramblers fried were exposed," Bobby shouted. "We got a window, Bobby. A very small, very hot window," Dicky screamed back, with the Intrepid still compensating for the electronic chaos. Dicky slammed the throttle to max, engaging the volatile, ancient third engine he'd secretly jury-rigged with enough power to tear the ship apart. The Lucky Strike became a streak of white-hot energy, screaming away from the blockade and the dying yellow star. They burst out of the system a few minutes later, the air in the cockpit finally cooling. Bobby clambered up, panting, and stared at Dicky. "We made it. But we didn't just risk the ship, Dicky. We risked the whole bloody galaxy. We could have taken a hit, lost the medicine, killed ourselves, all of it." Bobby slumped into the co-pilot seat. Dicky reached over, his hand resting on the battered control stick. On the distant, fading sensor readout, the deployment canister was registering as stable and decelerating in Xylos 7 upper atmosphere. The children down there, afflicted by the endemic fever, would live. The rebels, who relied on Dicky's supply lines, would have hope. "The Council wants order, Bobby. They want everyone in their neat little box," Dicky said quietly, staring into the blackness of the newly jumped-to system. "But sometimes, a few good people living outweighs all the laws ever made." He fired up a fresh cigar. the scent of fresh tobacco replacing the smell of burnt circuitry. He was still the most wanted man in the sector. His ship was barely holding together, and Commander Kalar would hunt him until the end of time. But the serum was delivered. Dicky James may have been an enemy of the law, but he was a friend of fate. He leaned forward, adjusting the ship's course for a quiet, long-range hideout. This time, the jump was smooth, almost anticlimactic after the solar skim. They materialized deep inside the dust shroud, a forgotten, slow-moving cluster of metallic asteroids orbiting a dead brown dwarf. No light, no life, and crucially, no Krillian Commander Kalar. Bobby was already in the cockpit, patching a smoking console with a fire-resistant sealant. We made it, but I'm telling you, Dicky, we're running on fumes and duct tape. That warp shift we did, it tore a seam in the plasma conduits. If we power up for another jump, we'll turn the Lucky Strike into a neutron star. Dicky took his hand off the controls, letting the ship drift in the silent gloom. Relax, Bobby. That's why we're here. We're not fixing this ourselves. He pointed to a small, nearly invisible transponder beacon nestled against a colossal, rust-colored asteroid. We're meeting a friend. The comm system crackled, not with council static, but with the cool, calm voice. Took you long enough, Dicky. The coordinates I gave you were for a limp, not a crawl. Dicky grinned, recognizing the voice. Always a pleasure, Cassidy. Had a few council cruisers slowing me down. You know how it is. Need some fresh parts, some structural realignment, and maybe a complete overhaul of everything south of the galley. A few minutes later, a tiny, sleek utility tug detached from the asteroid and pulled up alongside the Lucky Strike. The airlock hissed, and Cassidy Vance stepped into the cockpit. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and wore the heavy-duty uniform of a former Federation engineering corps, now thoroughly customized for the black market. She took one look at the smoldering console, the pressure warnings, and the frantic flicker of the shield indicator. You didn't push her, Dicky. You tortured her, Cassidy stated, crossing her arms. That third booster is atomized. The plasma coils are cracked. I can fix it, but it'll take 3 days, a lot of credits, and every reserve part I have. And I need to know why you ran it so hard. Kalar. Kalar, Dicky confirmed, nodding. The Krillian learned to think like a human. He was waiting at the logical escape vector, had to burn the fuel for a blind jump. Cassidy swore softly in a forgotten Earth dialect. That Krillian is dangerous, but fine. 3 days and half your next take. The parts are expensive. And speaking of which, she pulled a secure data pad from her belt and slid it across the console. You owe me more than just money now, James. I took this meeting because a mutual contact of ours is in deep trouble. Dicky picked up the pad. It displayed a grainy image of a man and a single word, rescue. Who is it? Marcus Thorne, the chief researcher who synthesized the phage buster serum you just dropped on Xylos 7, Cassidy explained, her voice dropping. The council didn't just ban the serum, they captured Thorne. They're holding him on a black site in the Corward sector, a place called Iron Citadel. They plan to extract the formula and then dispose of the source. Bobby gasped. The Iron Citadel. Dicky, that's not a ship, that's a fortress. It has its own standing fleet. Dicky's hand clenched around the data pad. He knew what they were doing. Kill the scientist, destroy the formula, and then let Xylos 7 recover just enough to remain a quiet, sick, compliant colony. This wasn't just about smuggling medicine. It was about protecting the source of all future hope. The Xylos 7 job was a distraction, Dicky realized, leaning back. Kalar letting us go after the payload was dropped. It wasn't incompetence. It was bait. He wanted me to think I won, so I'd get complacent while they moved Thorne. Cassidy nodded. He's patient, and right now Thorne is the key. The council wants that formula locked away forever. You break him out, Dicky. You save more worlds than just Xylos 7. Dicky looked at the battered controls of the Lucky Strike, then at Bobby, whose face was pale but determined. He thought about the council's cold calculus, order over life, stability over justice. He stood up, walking past Cassidy and Bobby to the viewport, staring out into the starless, empty black of the dust shroud. I don't do rescue ops, Cassidy. I haul cargo. I move things from A to B. This isn't just a man, James. This is cargo, the most important cargo in the galaxy, knowledge. The coordinates for human freedom, Cassidy countered. Dicky turned, a slow smile returning to his face, the kind of smile that made council officials lose sleep. Get to work, Bobby. 3 days, Cassidy. And I want that third engine rigged with something new, something the Krillian won't expect this time. He took the data pad from her, his thumb tracing the image of the scientist. The bounty for Thorne's escape would dwarf anything he'd ever made, enough to retire 100 times over. But Dicky didn't care about the credits. He saw a chance to stick a thumb in the eye of galactic cruelty. A ship is just metal and wire, Bobby. What matters is the direction you point it, Dicky declared, his voice firm. He had a mission, a wounded ship, and 3 days to prepare for the most dangerous job of his life. To be continued.